Welcome to the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast, where we hope to inspire you to embrace your God-given gifts, skills, and passions in order to lead with confidence. I'm your host, Esther Littlefield, a pastor's wife, business owner, mom, and writer. My co-host is Holly Kane, and together we chat about important issues that Christian women leaders face. In addition, we interview other women just like you who lead in various roles, from church to community to business. Through this podcast, we offer you encouragement, tools, and resources to help you on your leadership journey. We're so glad you're here with us. Hi, friend. I'm your host, Esther Littlefield.
And I'm your co-host, Holly Kane.
And today we are kicking off a new topic. We are going to be talking about balance. So it's going to be an interesting conversation today, and we're going to probably have a couple episodes about balance. So be watching for that coming up. And in the coming months, we are also going to be interviewing some women who are active either in running their own business or really actively involved in ministry, either in their women's ministry or pastors' wives or other leadership roles in the church. So we're going to get to hear from them and get their perspectives on this topic as well. So, Holly, you want to start us off here with talking about our reviews?
Yeah. We want to take a moment and just thank all of you who have taken the time to leave us a review. We appreciate them so much because when you leave a review, it helps others find out about the podcast and figure out whether or not it's for them. So I'm going to read a review from MASY Main Girl. She titles her review, "What a Treasure." And she says, "This new podcast is a great resource. I'm a business owner as well as a very active leader in my church. Esther and Holly are succinctly covering leadership spanning both worlds. Esther is a gifted interviewer. She allows the guests to shine and gently directs. The episodes are well organized with not a word wasted. I've been serving God for 40 years and running my own business for nearly 20, and I look forward to every episode of the Christian Women's Leadership Podcast. I subscribe to this podcast, and I subscribe to very few. This podcast is a real treasure. Thank you."
That is so nice. Thank you for leaving that review. And we really appreciate it. Like Holly said, when you leave a review, so after you listen to this episode, we would so appreciate it if you just click through into your podcast app and leave us a review. So before we jump into our topic about balance today and is balance possible, I want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by the Confident Leader Club. And we've mentioned that over the past couple weeks, but I want to just invite you to join us in the Confident Leader Club. It's a club specifically for Christian women leading in ministry or business, and we are providing community growth and action in that club. And so you're going to get access to bonus content that we're creating, workshops and trainings on specific topics. You get access to a private Facebook group for people that are in the club only, and lots more. So you can visit confidentleaderclub.com to learn more about it. And feel free to shoot us a message if you have any questions about it. So today we are talking about balance, like we said, and we want to dive into this idea of whether or not balance is possible. And I think we should just start by talking about what our lives look like as women, specifically as women leaders, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, and we definitely have covered this somewhat in some of our previous interviews with other women because we talk with women who have a lot going on in their lives. So let's just talk about some of the things that we have going on in our lives, Holly, and the things that we might be trying to quote unquote balance.
Right.
So I'll start. One of the things that many of us, I know not all of us have this, but many of us are married. So as you know, if you're married, you might be trying to do date nights. You might be trying to have regular communication with your spouse. You might be trying to support your spouse's career. You might just be trying to, eat dinner together once in a while. Cross paths during the week, right? That's one of them. What's another thing that we might be balancing?
So parenting. I don't know. Parenting, so it is not a burden, but if you are just trying to do everything so perfectly, it can feel that way.
Mm,
And trying to get the kids to all the activities and school, doctor's appointments, sicknesses, challenges, and that's if they don't have, you know, a disability. If you have a
yeah.
child with a disability or with any type of, layer on top of just regular childhood,
Hmm.
then that just becomes even compounded that much more.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
we were just talking before we started recording about the fact that my daughter's been sick for 3 days, and so
Mhm.
she's been out of school 3 days, and it's just totally been an extra challenge for me because it's taken me out of my normal routine of
Yeah.
working during the day and then picking her up from school and so on.
Mhm.
So definitely. Another thing is our career, right? A lot of our listeners are working women. They may be working from home with their own business. You might be dealing with a demanding boss or clients. You might
Yeah.
be managing a team. And, or if you're just working a normal 9 to 5 job or any other type of job, you have responsibilities. You have
Mhm.
to show up at certain times. You need to perform the work, and so that's another thing that we have as something that we're managing on our plate.
Yeah. And if that's not enough, you have friendships too that you want to try to keep in contact with. You want to try to talk to on a regular basis. You want to try to develop and be able to support those people as well, because they're doing all of those things too.
Yep.
Um, and friendships can get lost along the way very easily.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And then you also, of course, have church. If you're involved in a church, you are trying to attend church on a weekly basis. You may also be involved in serving in some capacity additional times throughout the week. Maybe you're leading a small group, or maybe you are running an event, or, maybe you are on the worship team. It could be any number of things, but that's another responsibility that you have on your plate to manage.
Mhm. And you may also be dealing with mental or physical health issues, anxiety, infertility, depression, cancer, weight gain, weight loss. I mean, from chronic diseases, hereditary diseases, all of these different things you might be dealing with just adds another level of complexity to every other thing you're already doing.
Yeah.
And that can be quite a strain mentally
Yeah.
and
Yeah, definitely.
emotionally.
Yeah. And then, of course, we often feel the pressure of physical fitness and appearance, that we have to look a certain way, or we have to be fashionable, or we need to work out 7 days a week, all of
Mhm.
these things to keep our health up, which, some of this, and none of this is like bad things
Right.
necessarily in and of themselves. It's just, we're just talking about all the things that we have to manage and juggle. And I'm sure I'm forgetting a bunch of things on this list. So,
I can think of a handful too, like
yeah.
just, being a good citizen,
Oh,
trying to stay up to date with everything that's going on. So when it comes time to vote or help in your community, you know what's going on.
uh-huh.
I am terrible at that.
Yeah.
So that when it comes time to, you know, do my civic duty or help in the community, it takes me forever to jump in because I have to figure out what's been going on for the
Yeah.
past year or 6 months.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I know some of our listeners might be homeschooling. So if you're homeschooling,
yeah,
that's another big responsibility.
yep,
If your kids are in sports, that's another thing. I mean, we talked about kids, but some kids are in like really high level sports, and that could be
mhm,
huge. Also, if you have pets, I mean, just keeping my
yep,
pets alive, I have to think about that on a daily
yeah,
basis. That,
yeah.
am I feeding them? Am I taking care of them? Right.
There's also, like para-church organizations, so ministries outside of church,
Yeah.
as well as charities or volunteer community type stuff.
Yeah.
So
Right.
we have a lot
So
going on.
exactly. So we have a lot to manage and juggle, and a lot of times I think we as women feel like we cannot stop, we cannot slow down, because if we do, we might drop one of the balls we're juggling, and it one of those balls that we drop could be something super important.
Mhm.
So it's no wonder that many of us feel stressed. And it's no wonder that we're trying to alleviate some of this by seeking that ever elusive idea of balance, or
Mhm.
having it all. We hear, I hear people saying, oh yes, you can have it all, you can do it all. You can do this thing. And so we want to talk today about whether or not balance is possible. And then we'll kind of dive into if it is or if it isn't, what should we be actually looking for? What should we be trying to achieve in our life? So first, I want to just talk about what the word balance means, because I like to kind of just define how we're looking at something
Yeah.
before we talk about it. I think it's helpful. So the dictionary definition of balance, there's two. There's a noun and a verb. So the noun is an even distribution of weight, enabling someone or something to remain upright and steady. And then the second definition there is a condition in which different elements are equal or in the correct proportions. Okay, so that's the noun. The verb definition is to keep or put something in a steady position so that it does not fall, and offset or compare the value of one thing with another. So I think we can agree that most of us don't want to fall over in our lives.
Yeah.
So in that sense, that's one way of looking at balance. So that's the dictionary definition of balance. But Holly, what do you think of when you hear the word balance?
So when I hear it, I think of someone who is doing everything perfectly, who does not get fazed by setbacks or when real life stuff just happens. They do it all. No balls get dropped. No person that relies on them is ever disappointed. And every single person that needs them gets exactly what they need. And perhaps they even get it with a nice, joyful attitude. And I just described someone who is not me.
You describe someone who I have never met.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that a lot of people, when they hear the word balance, they think of this idea of having it all together. Someone who is always put together, always on time, running on all cylinders all of the time.
Mhm.
So, that's the perception of balance. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about kind of how we're going to define it and what we look at here in a minute. But
Yeah.
why do you think we hear so much about balance and having it all? And why do we as women try to achieve it? Do you have any thoughts on that?
That's a good question. I think maybe it's part of how we were raised. It's our culture. We maybe saw our moms or role models in our lives doing that. Especially if you are brought up in the church culture, it's very prevalent to have that ideal mentality of having it all together. And sometimes it can even feel like, I'm not the Proverbs 31 woman. I can't buy and sell land. I'm not up in the middle of the night by, candlelight sewing clothes for my family.
Yeah.
And it just feels like a really high bar to
Hmm.
try to achieve. And
Yeah.
we have, if you've grown up in the church, that can be pretty ingrained in you that
Yeah.
that's what you're supposed to do and um, that's what you're supposed to achieve.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for me, even it's been just putting my own pressure on myself, my
Yeah.
own ideals and ambitions of what I want my life to look like, wanting to be, a good fill in the blank, a good wife, a good mom, a good leader. And my definition of what that looks like often has included having everything put together.
Yeah.
And then I think there's also the idea of, we get this pressure because we feel guilt over pursuing something other than that.
Yeah.
So if our idea of having balance or having it all together is being a great mom, a great wife, a great church member, a great ministry leader, a great business owner, all of those things, and then we want to pursue a hobby or a passion, we feel guilty about doing that because
Yeah.
it takes us away from doing all of those other things.
Yeah.
So,
I think another um, thing that sort of pushes us to feel that way or pushes us to think that we need to have it all. I honestly think that it's a lie that the devil has put into society that we've taken the bait, hook, line, and sinker.
yeah,
And it's to get us to pay attention to our circumstance rather than surrendering to God.
yeah,
And we have bought into that so hardcore. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like you said, we see it glorified in the church world, but we also see it
Yeah.
glorified in the secular world,
Oh,
in culture.
absolutely.
The people that are on the front of the magazines, the
Mhm.
women that are lifted up as successful, etc., are often portrayed as having
Mhm.
it all together. Even though when you really look into their life and how they do things, they often have a lot of help. They often have lots and lots of systems in place and lots of
Yeah.
support around them to do the things that they're doing. They're never
Mhm.
doing it on their own or just as a completely solo person.
Yeah.
But the portrayal that we see is like, look at this woman. She has it all together. She's
Yeah.
balanced. She's perfectly working out all the time. And she has four wonderful children that adore her and never do
Mhm.
anything wrong.
And I think,
So,
like, even if we look at role models in society, so secular people who are role models. I mean, 50 years ago, those people were maybe actresses, maybe singers, those sorts of things, but they were just doing that. Now you have people who have fashion lines, they have books, they are founders of organizations. And so that perception has turned from, well, you can't just do the one thing that you're good at. You have to do all of these other things. You have to be a mogul. You have to be super well rounded. And I'm not saying that those are bad things by any stretch of the imagination, but as a consumer of those portrayals of women, it can very sneakily uh, tell you that you have to also be doing those things
right.
just by portraying what those women are doing,
Yeah.
or those role models in our society. So
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
yeah.
Okay, so we know that we're balancing or managing a lot of things, a lot of
Hmm.
responsibilities as women leaders. We also know that we have a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
So we're going to try and each answer the question: do we think that balance is possible? And if not, what should we be shooting for instead? So, Holly, you want to start us off with what your
Yeah.
thoughts are on this?
So I definitely think that balance is a load of crock. That perfect life is just a huge myth. I feel like for older generations, it was like the leave it to beaver idea, but now it's evolved into that perfect Pinterest lifestyle. Your house has to be perfect. You have to be perfectly dressed. You also have to do all of the perfect crafts with your kids. And as I said before, that is a lie straight from the devil. And believing that that type of lifestyle is attainable has set us up for so many catastrophic consequences. I mean, this is why a lot of us are dealing with anxiety, depression, paranoia, addiction, eating disorders, narcissism, vanity, gluttony, greed, consumerism. And all of that stuff just panders to our pride. So we say things like, I've got it, I can handle it, I'm a strong, capable woman. You hear all the time, believe in yourself, just go for it, you can do it. And none of that is biblical.
Mm,
So when I think about the idea of balance and I think about it in this fashion, this sense, in my mind, it's not attainable.
okay.
It's not attainable. And I don't think that that's what I want to even be shooting for.
Mm, okay.
So,
Awesome.
yeah.
So we'll talk about what we're shooting for in a minute.
Yeah.
But I would say that my view of balance has definitely changed over time.
Mm.
And it definitely used to be something that I was aiming for. I actually had, before my blog was estherlittlefield.com, the title of it was Wellness Mom Life. And my tagline was balancing marriage, motherhood, and ministry.
Mm.
So that was my idea of what I was trying to help women do. And so my perspective is that I don't think it's all bad to be looking for balance, but that I don't think that that word is really the way we've just described that word is not actually what I mean by the
Right.
word.
Right.
So it's kind of a complex thing to describe. But I would say the balance is not possible in the sense of having all areas of your life evenly distributed or being able to give equal time to all of your responsibilities. But to me, balance doesn't mean that all of your life is exactly aligned to your satisfaction 100% of the time.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that you never feel stressed or you have days that are chaotic. For me, it means more that the way you're spending your time and your life are are in the areas that matter most to you,
Yeah.
and that most of the time you're operating out of a place of contentment instead of chaos.
Mm.
So, one of the things that I thought about when I was kind of thinking through this topic is I had a professor in college, and I was taking a social work course because that was what I studied. And she talked about this idea of values, and that we all have values in our lives, things that matter to us. And she said, I wish I had the direct quote, but from what I can remember, she said, all values cannot be maximized simultaneously.
Mm.
Basically, what she meant by that is that there's always going to be a order of the values that you have. You know, if you have 10 values, it's going to go from 1 to 10. You cannot have value A and value B have the equal importance at the same time. One of them has to be given more importance than the other, or
Mm.
more weight than the other. And so when I think of balance, I think, what I want to be shooting for is to be clear on what's most important in my life and in that particular season or moment, and spend my time on those things.
Mm. That's really good. I like that quote, or the idea anyway. Maybe
Yeah.
it's not the direct quote,
It may not
but
be a direct quote, but it's pretty close, I think.
yeah. So I prefer to use the perspective of priorities rather than the word balance. I personally don't like the word balance because at this point, I don't feel like I can redeem that word from its current connotation.
Mm,
I feel like the word has just been pushed on us as some sort of idea to achieve, and it doesn't have a definable or measurable way to succeed it.
mm,
And so then that just leaves us feeling like we're all failures. And that also leads us to, or it lends itself to the idea that there's one way to have balance, that everyone needs to work towards. And when we all know that every person and every family is different, we know that it's not all one way to do it. That's not reality. There's
yeah.
no one size fits all method for exactly how the trash gets taken out, or when the dog gets walked, or when the kids get a bath. There's no one size
Yeah.
fits all.
Right. And I think of a lot of times, the question of should women be at home or should they be working, or
Mhm.
should you homeschool your kids or should they go to public school? And
Yep.
I think a lot of times people come up with a one size fits all solution for those things.
Yes.
And like you said, I don't agree with that at all. I
Yep.
think it absolutely has to be an individual, you and God and you and your husband, if you're married, making those decisions
Yep.
together.
And I think that's why I prefer the perspective of priority, because priorities automatically assume that something is in last place.
Hmm.
And so that is such a freeing concept, because in my mind, the idea of balance is that everything gets its utmost value. And that's not realistic. So I can accept that as my priorities shift, someone's going to be disappointed. And I'm okay with that because I know that my top priorities are being taken care of first. So for me, priorities help me keep the most important things at the top rather than feeling like everything deserves my attention. And having those clear priorities helps me make better, more freeing decisions because I don't feel like I have to commit to everything, but I'm actually committed to keeping those things in order.
Yeah.
So by contrast, I'm able to feel free to not say yes to everything.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah, and I would definitely agree with that. I think that what I want for myself and what I'm shooting for is
mm,
to be content with where God has me right now,
yeah,
and to not be feeling like I need to be doing something else. And I think when you're focused on balance, you're always feeling like you're not doing the thing that you should be doing at that moment,
yeah,
because you're thinking, oh my word, I have to be, if I'm, for example, if I'm working on my business, I might be thinking, oh my goodness, the laundry needs to be done, the dishes need to be done, I should be doing some
mhm,
craft with my daughter, and
yeah.
I'm feeling un um unbalanced
You're
because I'm not spending the time on those things. I'm spending the time on
Yeah,
something else. Yeah.
you're in a constant state of guilt.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't think that that's what God wants for us. And I don't think that
Yeah.
that's what we want anyone to be
Mm-mm.
feeling.
Yeah.
So again, for me, it's more about this idea of contentment. And I was trying to think of a couple other words that would represent what I mean by balance when I
Mhm.
say it in a positive way. And I thought of the word harmony. And it's the word harmony makes me think of going to an orchestra or going to a concert even and hearing different sections of the orchestra playing the music louder at certain times than others, and sometimes certain instruments aren't even being played at all, right?
Mm.
And so the string section might be really loud at one moment and the percussion section is completely silent, but it sounds good because it's in harmony. And then other times there might be the percussion section is louder and the strings are playing quietly. And so it's all working together, but
Mm.
one thing is being given, like you said, priority over
Yeah.
the other. So in my life, if I know what is most important, and God and I have, have talked about that, and there's, like you said, that values, that you're clear on your values and your priorities, then I know when I'm sitting down to work on my business, okay, right now, this is the thing that I need to be doing in my life. I'm contributing to my family. It's important. And this is one of my top priorities. So I need to spend this time on this activity.
Mm.
And when I'm going out and going for a walk with my daughter, right now, this is what's most important in my life. I'm
Yeah.
spending time with my daughter and building that relationship. So for me, I feel like harmony makes more sense than the word balance, because it means that there's different pieces of your life getting more weight or more importance at different times, even during the day or during the week. There might be different parts
Yeah.
having more importance. And then another
Mm.
word is alignment, and it's a tricky word because I think it's used in different ways in different subgroups of culture. But the word for me, what I mean is that as I have worked through my schedule and my values and my priorities and these different topics and even our goals, like we've been talking about over the past couple months, I definitely feel like I have been able to align my life closer to what I feel like God is giving me to do, you
Yeah.
know, and I've been able to get clear on the things that are most important. Therefore, I have felt more in alignment with, okay, this is where God wants me. I'm going to be content with this right now. I'm not going to be striving for something else. And I know that a lot of our guests have talked about this too, in some of our conversations, just about how they do this and how they're able to say, okay, right now, this is what's a priority. This is what's most important. And
Mm.
it's not about spending the equal time on XYZ all the time.
Right. Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So I love that idea of harmony that you described, because as I think about it, and each different section sort of has their moment to kind of increase in volume or decrease. If you had every section at the same decibel level, they were all super loud, it would just sound like noise.
Yeah.
And it would just sound deafening and um, really hard to digest as a
Yeah.
listener.
It would
And
be
so
chaotic.
yeah, it's very important that each one has its own time to crescendo and to, be strong and loud, and other times to fall back. And so as you think about that, and as I, remember sitting um, in the symphony and listening to the orchestra play, it makes for a more beautiful dynamic piece, a more
Mhm.
beautiful dynamic song, to hear those different pieces come and go throughout the time of the piece. And
Yeah.
so, and it just makes me think about that's the symphony that God wants to play with our lives, is
Hmm.
is that beautiful song of us allowing him to show us when it's time for certain things to increase and decrease. And I don't know, I just thought it was a really beautiful picture.
Mm.
Um, because I think that all God really wants from us is a heart surrendered to him moment by moment, and letting him lead, letting him tell
Yeah.
us what things need to be of utmost importance at that
Hmm.
time.
Yeah.
So
And
I
if
just
we
love
if we
that.
use that analogy of the symphony and the orchestra, then we can think of God as the director,
Yeah,
right? He's the one
exactly.
telling which sections to be louder and
Yeah.
which sections to be quieter at different times. And I've even been thinking about this just in terms of, like we said, our whole lives,
Mm.
that at different times, different seasons of my life, different things have had to take priority. So when
Yeah.
my daughter was a baby, I that had to be my priority of my time, and the bulk of my time was spent on just caring for her
Mhm.
and raising her. And
Yeah.
even then, when she became a toddler and, preschool, there was still the bulk of my time was there, and I didn't have as much time and flexibility in my schedule to do some of the things that I'm doing now. So I was listening to a podcast from my friend Merritt, and her podcast is the Devoted Dreamers podcast. And it was an episode with Holly Christine Hayes, and I'll link to it in the show notes. It's episode 106 of her podcast. But they were talking about this idea of having a dream, and that when you have a dream, it might require a lot of you, or even all of you, to pursue that dream. And so they had a discussion about the idea of really that there are seasons, and there might be times that you might not be able to pursue a dream because of the current season of your life.
Mm.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
And just kind of giving us permission to realize that we don't have to do everything
Yeah.
right now.
Mhm.
And I have to remind myself of that, because I
Yeah.
always want to be able to do all the things that I feel God has called me to, or that are on my heart and my mind, like this year, right? And so, but what you said, Holly, is a heart that's surrendered to God moment by moment. And so there might be times where surrendering to God in this moment means not pursuing certain activities because it's not the right time in my life,
Yeah.
and that God maybe has a different season for that dream or that activity. And that's
It's
okay.
so yeah, that's such a hard thing to swallow, especially if you really feel passionate about that dream and you really love it, especially when you think that it would be exactly within God's will, like it would be serving God. So like I'll explain, I have an example. When we went to Guatemala the first time, when I came back, I was like, "Yep, I'm ready to sell everything and move." I would have lived there. I still would live there. If someone said, if God called me out of my sleep while I was sleeping and said, "I want you to go to Guatemala," I would sell everything and move there tomorrow.
Mm, right.
And I would serve the kids in the villages, and I would, help build the church there. I love that. I love, love, love that. But
Hmm.
that's not what he's called me to right now.
Hmm.
And it's been very clear that that's not what he wants for me, maybe ever. Maybe when I retire, I'll get there. But that at the time, after I came back, was a hard pill to swallow because I felt very passionate about it. And I felt very connected to those people, very tied to them, like I've never felt tied to anyone before. They were immediately family.
Hmm.
And you don't leave family to fend for themselves. And so, yeah, it can be difficult to figure that out and to know that even sometimes the good things that you feel like are serving God are not necessarily what he wants from you at that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I've definitely experienced the same thing, not exactly as the Guatemala situation, but I have always been the type of person that is interested in adventure and more exciting things, and what's the next big accomplishment that God might have for me. And one of the things that I've had to learn, and I think why I'm talking about this idea of contentment, is that sometimes what God wants is for me to be willing to stay rather than go.
Yeah.
And that staying for me is actually harder than going,
Yep.
because
Yeah.
staying means kind of a boring
Yeah.
life. And I
Yeah.
don't mean that my life is boring, but like, to, as compared to some big adventure of being
Yeah.
called to a different place, a different season, a different people, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So I think that if we think about this idea of balance, harmony, alignment, whatever it is, I think we can agree that it's not about having everything equally distributed or all the things, all the plates being held up. And it's more about, like you said, being surrendered to God, being content with where He has you,
Mm,
and then knowing what your priorities are in each moment, in each season,
yeah.
and being willing to put the time and effort into those priorities, even when they might not be the fun and exciting things that you would rather be doing.
Yeah. That's good.
So I think when we do this too, it's going to result in us feeling less stressed and overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Because I think that the stress and the overwhelm come from sensing that we are not achieving something that is this ideal of what we want to be doing, right?
Right.
So we are overwhelmed and stressed if we have too many things on our plate, if we're trying to balance all the things and do all the things perfectly well all the time.
Mhm.
Uh, and if we can let go of that pressure and let go of that perception of who we think we are supposed to be, we're going to be a lot less stressed. And
Mm,
one of the things that
yeah.
we want to talk about in the next episode is how to do this. So we've talked kind of about the what and the why, but we want to give some practical examples of ways to surrender to God, of ways to maybe let go of some things that you need to let go of and to have less stress. So that's what we're going to do in the next episode.
Yeah. I'm excited
Anything
about that
else? Anything else you want to add to this as we wrap up?
No, I think that's good. I've really enjoyed this topic because I've sort of had this brewing in my mind for quite a while that, we have this ideal that we think we have to achieve, and that's just not so.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
right.
I enjoyed
Yeah.
our conversation.
Yeah, so if there's anything you can take away from this episode, I would say to just let go of the pressure that you might feel to have a balanced life and to really dig in and ask God where He has you right now, what He wants from you right now, and to just ignore all the other pressures or voices that you might hear.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
Okay. So be sure to listen to the next episode where we're going to give you some practical strategies. And we're going to wrap up our episode, as we always do, with a fun question. So,
I
Holly,
love
what's our
these.
question?
Okay, Esther, if you woke up tomorrow as an animal, what animal would you choose to be and why?
Oh, goodness. Okay. So, I didn't think a super long time about this, but the first animal that popped into my head is a cat. Because as you know, if you've been listening to this podcast for any time, I am Enneagram 1. I like to get a lot done. I have very high standards and I try to be productive in my life.
Yeah.
And when I look at a cat, it's like the opposite of that. A cat gets to just curl up on the couch or curl up on the bed or curl up anywhere and take a nap
Mhm.
whenever they feel like it. Then they
Yep.
get up and run around and play. I have 2 cats, and so I see this all day long. Like, this is what I see all day long. They play, and then they eat, and then they take a nap, and then they play, and then they eat and take a nap. It's just, like, the cycle of their day, and it just looks so relaxing, and so if I
Mhm.
think about, like, if I were to be another animal, it would be kind of the opposite of who I am.
Yeah.
I think it would be a cat because I could just be cozy and cute and snuggly all the time and
Mhm.
basically run the household also at the same time.
In
Because
between all your naps.
in between all my naps, right. But when they are awake, they are the ones that are in charge.
Oh, yeah.
Don't be fooled
I think
by
that
their size.
that's the perfect animal for you.
But Holly and I talked about this before, and I actually was never a cat person.
Mhm.
I actually hated cats growing up because I was deathly allergic. Like I had severe asthma and we had to get rid of the cats that my parents had before I was born because they found out I was so allergic. And so for a long time I thought I was not a cat person. And then when we got a cat, when Scott and I got married, I got a cat. I like test drove the cat first at the Humane Society to see if I was going to have a reaction and I didn't. And so we got this one cat and then the cats have just grown on me because they have like claimed me as their person. Well, the first cat kind of claimed me as her person and then forced me to love her. So,
So are you not allergic anymore?
well, weirdly, I don't have the problems as much as I did. So I will still sometimes have a reaction at someone else's house if they have
Oh.
a particular, I think it really depends on the type of cat and like if they're a long-haired cat or if there's a lot of carpet. I had a lot more allergies in our previous house where there was a lot of carpet. Now, with the
Mhm.
wood floors, I'm able to deal with it a lot better. So,
Well, I'm glad that that is the case because if you woke up the next morning and you were allergic to yourself, that would be a really bad situation.
yeah, if I woke up the next morning and I was a cat and I was allergic to myself, that would be weird. It'd be weird. All right, Holly, what about you? What animal would you choose to be?
So when we first talked about this, a cat was also my choice for the exact same reasons, and for the exact same observations. I mean, they rule the house and then they take a nap, and
Yeah,
that's just the cycle.
yeah.
But as I was thinking about it a little bit more, I think my other choice would be a dolphin because you can breathe underwater, first of all, and they swim super fast. You could like dive deep down into the water and just see all the cool things at the bottom of the ocean. And they're, in my opinion, probably the most adorable sea animal.
They are. They're so cute.
And they're so smart and they're super
Mm.
social, which is just, yeah. So I think that that's what I would be. And I think part of it is because I one time in my life tried snorkeling and it was a terrible experience for me.
Oh no.
um and so ever since then I was like, oh, I kind of idolized it in my head as this like super amazing experience, and when it wasn't, yeah, it was hard for me to accept. But
Oh,
so I think a dolphin, I mean, you're basically diving all day long and you
yeah,
can see all that stuff without having to wear one of those masks or one of those,
yeah.
whatever those things are
Right.
called, the straw,
Snorkel.
the snorkel, the straw from your mouth.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's funny.
I'm so
Okay.
eloquent.
You know, we got through the episode. That's what's
Yeah,
important. So,
it's true.
yeah.
It's true.
All right, guys. So we thank you for listening. If you're still here, also we appreciate you sticking through to the end.
Yeah.
And as we mentioned at the beginning, we would love it if you leave us a review, and you might even get your review read on the air. So, we're going to start trying to read those more often. So, yeah, and come back next time to listen to the next episode about how to reduce overwhelm and stress in your life as a leader. Thanks for joining us on the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider leaving us a rating and review in your podcast app? This helps more women just like you find the podcast, and it also helps them to know whether the podcast would be a good fit for them. Just go to the show in your podcast app, then scroll down until you see the option for ratings and reviews. From there, you can tap to rate and write a review. It means the world to us when you take a couple minutes to do this, and thank you so much to everyone who has left a review. Now, don't forget, your leadership matters, and it's time for you to embrace your gifts and lead with confidence.